welcome, Jamie.
Hey, Tink, how you doing? This is going to be fun.
You're one of my first guests. Go
I
ahead.
heard you had David Wagner on before, though. I don't know if I could measure up to the size of that guy's shoes. He is an amazing man, and what a giant in the faith. And so,
I know he'd say the same thing about you. So then, yeah, your life. You've been doing ministry for how many years now?
20 years. I'm in the middle of a 20-year spree.
You've been traveling the world, you've been speaking, and you've been moving in the prophetic. And I don't know if many people would really know what the prophetic is. So how would you describe the prophetic?
The prophetic is really cool. It's just it's the nature of God's voice activated in a person's life. And the prophetic becomes the expression of how they communicate that. You put out a piece of paper. Why don't you take some paint or some markers or coloring crayons, right? And just draw what God is putting on your heart right now. Put a mirror image out there of what it is that God is placing on your heart. That's actually the prophetic at work. And so the prophetic begins to be the expression of God's voice in your life. And God's voice is very fluid. It moves like water. He's called his voice is called the voice of many waters. And so when the voice of many waters hits your life, it goes through your life in many different expressions. There's your personal life, there's your business life, there's your family life, there's your education, all these different areas of your life that the voice of many waters touches. And so you begin to express yourself in a new way, in a different way. It takes some maturation in developing history with God. But Elijah, the prophet, who was an established prophet, even he had to learn how to hear the voice of God, because after all of this ministry that he did, all these prophecies that he did, God brings him out on the mountain and he has to learn how to hear the still small voice. And he says God was in the still small voice. And so for us, the prophetic, it's always a learning curve. It's never like an arrival. It's something that you are always learning every day.
When was your first prophetic word? How did you move into that?
Oh man, I don't want to sound too glamorous with the prophetic, because probably my first prophetic word was not even a near miss. It was just a way off. I mean, it was so bad that I almost literally just gave up on the prophetic altogether. Probably the first time I saw that it was actually real and true, that it was doing something, it was actually making an effect on someone, and it was actually at a rainbow gathering in Montana. I would go to these New Age festivals, New Age gatherings for about 2 years. I was traveling around all over the U.S. with a group of hippies, and we would go around and we would minister to these hippies. And these are all these hippies. I mean, real hippies, stinky hippies, patchouli wearing hippies. We would just love on them. 50,000 people in the middle of the woods, and we'd feed them and clothe them and just give them help and whatever we could, right? This one was in Montana, and we would camp out literally for 2 weeks and just love on these people. And we traveled around all over. And I remember on a mountain side in Montana, while the sun was setting, I was ministering to this one, looked like a couple, right? And they were at the gathering, and they were there for sort of their own reasons. But I stopped them and I said, "Hey, you mind if I pray for you guys? I'm doing free prayer." And they said, "Sure." And so I offered them free prayer, and then instantly I just started hearing and seeing things about their life. These are like impressions. These were like, ideas, and they were all kind of coming to me. And I started telling them things, very specific things about them. And it just started popping off. And it was just so right on. I mean, but then literally the next day, it just continued. And I remember going to this right outside of our camp where we were camped, and there was this young man, and I said, "Were you in a bike accident when you were like 7? Yeah. Did handlebars go through your ribs?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Okay, so then when you were 17, did you get in a car accident and you were hanging off literally your car was like almost about to fall off a cliff?" He said, "Yes." Yeah. And I in my spirit, I saw an angel come and literally save this guy. I said, an angel of God came and saved you from the bike accident, saved you from the car accident. How would you like to know Jesus? And he says, yes, I would. And it was just such a boom moment. It was like, wow. For me, that moment was one of those that helped to crystallize the prophetic in me. It really gave me some understanding, a language of meaning behind the prophetic, that is to lead people to Jesus. Yeah. And so I had so much energy from that moment that I was just like, this is it. I'm done. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. And so I dedicated as much time to the practice of prophecy that I could. And I've definitely logged my 10,000 hours and still continuing. I got my flight miles. I got, all that. So I'm going to keep on going.
So good. And, I think it's so encouraging for people to hear that your first actual prophetic word was a miss. Because sometimes when people practice, they're like, I want to practice my prophetic gift, and then they miss. It's like, oh, I just want to give up. I'm not prophetic. But we're all prophetic.
Totally.
My favorite thing is the prophetic, because it instantly can change someone's life. With the word of knowledge, it can all of a sudden really become real for a person that, wow, God sees me. God knows me. God knows that specific moment. God knows that I got in a bike accident. He sees me, and he's speaking to this random person, to reach me. And that's what I love about the prophetic. Well, where are you from originally?
Originally, I was born in Ohio, in Cleveland. Spent very little time there, and ended up moving to St. Louis, Missouri. My father moved around because of business. We stopped off in Lafayette, Louisiana. We stopped in Rockford, Illinois, but then eventually ended up in St. Louis, Missouri. So that was really sort of where I grew up into the age of like 18, 20 years old before I moved on. And, but, St. Louis was sort of, I'm a Cardinals fan. I'm a St. Louis Blues fan. And so I love St. Louis. And so that's where I grew up. Yeah.
And you mentioned your dad. Your dad is in the food industry, right? He owns a restaurant, or?
Yeah, he's a restaurant guy. He started off as a pizza delivery guy. And so I have so much respect for my father. And he's really worked his way up from the bottom. He was a pizza delivery guy, and so my family, the story of my parents, they couldn't afford even diapers. My dad actually had to sell his guitar to a pawn shop to afford diapers. And there was a time in my father's career where we literally ate pizza like 3 times a day. I mean, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, because it was just, he was just trying to make it. But I learned a lot about life through that time, because my dad he's a good man, and he's still running his restaurants. Now he has some sit down restaurants, all that stuff, but he would bring me to work with him, and he would do this like 3-4 days a week. And so we did the kind of back and forth between school and homeschool. So certain periods of my life were homeschool, but I remember going with my father to his restaurant and watching him. And I was like, wow, people listen to this guy, and it gave me a different understanding of life to see sort of my dad in action, my father in action. And so watching my dad do his thing, it gave me an appreciation for hard work. And also, I'm a big food guy. I love food. And you and Sam have come over. Yeah. You can attest. I hit a home run. That was a rare thing.
That was a home run steak for sure.
I tell you what, it's not hard to screw up a steak, but when you do a steak, you got to do it right. No,
but you did it well. You did it well, and you gave us the what is it called? The tomato mozzarella and basil.
Oh yeah, the caprese. I did a caprese salad.
Oh my God,
man, that's my jam. Good. So good. Yes. I've been living off of, in the middle of quarantine, I've been living off of, peanut butter and cereal. So
that's the only way to live right now,
which I'm happy to do. I'm so happy I have all of that. And so, but I'm keeping my good stuff for when I get my friends back,
Yeah. When all this is over, we'll share a good steak again. Well, I love hearing about, your life. What else, can you tell me about your childhood? what was it like for you? Did you grow up Christian, or were you like, did you get saved at some point?
Yeah, I got saved a lot, actually. And that's the honest truth. I mean, I can remember the first time I got saved was probably about 4. But I got saved quite a bit growing up. That was sort of the thing to do, right? I mean, every time somebody says, come to Jesus, and I never, ever really followed through. I mean, for me, it was a prayer. It was and I didn't really think differently. I mean, we had a foreign exchange student from Denmark when I was a kid, and that foreign exchange student sort of opened my mind up to the way the world thinks. And, very European, very, world, I say very cultured guy. For the first time, I heard someone explain to me how they didn't believe God was real. And I thought, I literally got in like this argument with this guy. I was thinking, who doesn't believe God is even real? I mean, it's a very rare thing today, even in today's culture, for people forget, Christianity, that people today would not actually ascribe to some kind of higher power or a being that created the universe.
When we went to Australia, it really opened our eyes to how we grew up in the Bible Belt. Like, we grew up in America where it's like, everyone pretty much believes in God.
Yeah.
And then you like have conversations with people in the world and they're just like, what's Easter about? That's the Easter bunny. I'm like, no, Easter is about Jesus, but you don't know the story of Jesus. And then it's like, it's mind blowing when people don't actually know, like, you just grow up in something and then you have this whole perspective change when you go outside of that bubble,
Exactly. And so, a lot of folks will, for us in sort of this Western world, we're raised with our conscious, sort of implanted into us this idea of Jesus. And it's sort of inside of our calendar, even all that type of stuff. But you go over to different parts of the world, they have different beliefs. And so, but for me, that was really an eye opener. And I thought, oh man, I need to find out more about Jesus and about the world. And so, when I got the first chance to travel the world, I took it. And it's something that I feel, somebody asked me one time, what do you think is the most important thing you could do in raising your child? Yeah. And there's a lot of great things that you could do, but probably I think the most important thing is take them places other than where they grew up. This idea that, the world revolves around where you grew up, where you were born. I thought the capital of the world was St. Louis at one point in my mind. I mean, I thought, when I at 18 went to Brazil, for the first time and saw a different people group, or I went to Africa, at 20, 21, when I went to Africa, and I start to see, wow, the world is very different. The world thinks differently. And so it's just I think it's something that helps you see from God's perspective the work that He's doing, the thing that He's up to. And to be clear, Tink, I didn't grow up necessarily. I grew up in a Christian home, but it wasn't the most Christian home. My dad was a good man. My mother, great woman. Like they loved Jesus, but it wasn't like we said our prayers every day, or something like that. I grew up very, in regard to my practice, the lifestyle that I lived, I was far from Jesus, So there was a clear BC and AD moment in my life, I mean, I was like once this one guy, and then boom, all of a sudden this new guy comes, and new guy shows up, and new guy's like, I want to follow Jesus. I want to just preach the gospel. I want to tell people about Jesus. And so, my dad, he would just he was okay with it, but I would answer that. I was working for him actually at Domino's. And so I would answer the phone, Tink, and I would go, thanks for calling Domino's Pizza. Jesus loves you. I'd say, hey, I'm here to take your order. What's going on? And so, then we would get in the conversation. I'd hang up. I go, we'll be there in 30 minutes. Jesus loves you. For me, I was like, I was coming alive. I was coming alive with this radical gospel that had taken a hold of my life. And that was really a fun experience because, after we get all of our work done and be diligent, we'd hold little Bible studies in the back room of that pizza store, and I'd have my buddies come and hang out, and we'd just see amazing things, and it was a cool experience. I mean, we were learning, and with learning, you're going to make some mistakes, you're going to make some errors, and I made plenty of those, still do, but I made plenty of those when I was sort of at that zeal point, because I was so ready to share with the world the amazing experience that happened in my life. I mean, I went from depression, anxiety, no purpose in life, all those things, and different types of fears and whatever, shame. I had shame that I was like, oh man, I'm so ashamed of my life. And people don't talk about that type of stuff, but that was real to me. And so when I came to Jesus, all of a sudden, all this shame is gone, all the fear is gone, all the pain is gone, all the the worry, and the sense of purpose is on. And I go, oh my gosh, my life is for this, and it just changed everything. And so for me, that was the game changer. But I needed someone. I needed a mentor. I needed people. It takes a village to raise a child. It takes a lot of mentors to raise someone in the prophetic and in the ways of God.
And it's so hard, when you first become saved and, you are that loud gong or whatever, but then when those feelings come back up, like shame, depression, anxiety, all that stuff comes back up and you're like, what do I do? I thought all this was gone. And then more shame piles up because you're like, it's not supposed to be here, especially at a young age. It's like, what do you do?
Yeah, totally. I've learned to look at my life in from a different lens. I've learned to look at my emotions from a different lens. They're not my thermostat. They're my thermometer. And so they tell me what's going on. They don't set the mood for me. They don't set the temperature for me. And so I look at him like, something's, it's sort of like, you have a headache, you take a Tylenol, but maybe your headache is because your neck is out of alignment. And in the same way, spiritually, you wake up, you're not feeling with it, you're not feeling legit, you're not feeling purpose. And so, and you could get bogged down. You could say, oh man, you feel emotionally drained or feel emotionally you feel emotionally inept. Is it because you're not doing enough? Is it because of this or because of that? Or maybe there's something else going on way beneath the surface that God's bringing up at the right time, and he knows how to do that. You got these different people that, look, I mean, I got radically saved and I got radically touched and I said yes to Jesus, right? Mm. But you got these folks running around and all I do is wake up in awesome mode, and you're like, that's not real. I wish that was real, but that's not real. And because it says about Jesus even, that he was a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. It's not something that it was foreign to him. Why would it be foreign to us? But it's, what do you do when the opposition comes? What do you do when your own conscience is talking against you? What do you do when your mood is saying, you're not worthy, you're not good enough, all that type of stuff? Well, you just keep on moving forward. Eventually that stuff's going to wear out, but you know what your mission is, and so you stay about the mission.
Hi, my name is Samantha McCabe, and I'm a singer-songwriter in the Houston area. And I actually got to go to high school with Tink and sing in choir together. So it was such a treat when she asked to use this video of one of my original songs called Lean In. This song was actually written in 2015, and it was just during a very difficult time where I'd made a decision and stepped out, and I just didn't really know what else to do after that. I had tried to make a step out in faith, and it didn't look like things were going to work out, and I was really terrified. So I just began to worship God. I got my guitar out And that's where the song came out, because it was just the declaration of my heart to lean in and press into everything that he is, even when I can't see it. So today I hope that you connect with it, that it ministers to you, and I hope that you can press in and lean into who God is during this really difficult time.
Well, I don't want to take up any more of your time. I do want to ask you one last question.
Let's do it.
What do you think that God is doing right now in this time, this global time? Like, what do you think God's doing right now? This doesn't have to be prophetic. This can just be like, what's your heart for right now for people?
So, when you have, here's an interesting illustration. When you have a tire that's flat or hissing because it's got air coming out of it, one of the things that you do with a bike tire or any kind of tire is you put pressure on it to find out where the hole is. And it helps you identify where there's holes. Well, right now, I believe God is allowing a pressure to come upon us, a shaking to come upon us. And it's not because he's upset. It's because he wants us to be able to identify where the holes are so that we can begin to patch up and repair what it is that we need to repair. And so there are holes that were invisibly leaking, life from us. And so individually, there are things going on in our life where we're feeling pressure mount. We're feeling all this. But it's because God is going to help us see where the holes are so that we can be repaired. We can come back together. Yeah. As, the nations go, God is shaking the nations. I mean, for me, the kind of realization of this is that when people talk about, well, this is the devil, I don't think the devil is this big. When I really think about it, I've never ever thought of the devil as this big, because if the devil is this big, he's a lot bigger than I've ever imagined him to be, right? Mm-hmm. However, I believe that God is allowing the operation of the enemy to shake things right now. And wouldn't it be like God to take the credit, and say, even the devil can't even get, credit for the things that he does, Right. And so God's going to work something, because that's what he does. He works all things together for the good, right? Yeah. It may not be option A, but it could be option B. It could be options. It's not his best, but it's what he's allowing to happen. And because quite frankly, his best is Eden. His best is paradise, but we've fallen short of that glory. So he's got to work in a dysfunctional world and help us be able to see where he's at. So right now, he is allowing the shaking to happen. But here's the thing. We're not to be just in fear or frozen by the moment going, okay, if the shakings happen, I may as well just give up. No, what he's looking for is a response of faith from us. And that response of faith says, I'm going to reinvent the wheel in this time. I mean, the things that I've done in the past aren't going to work anymore. So there's a new wineskin going to happen. And yes, this is a time when the shaking happens that you get an opportunity to reinvent the wheel. And new parts of your personality begin to come out. New parts of your identity begin to come out. Good. You begin to see things about yourself, and you begin to rise to the occasion. So in the midst of this, what is God doing with his people? He's causing heroes to arise. He's causing heroes to emerge. And there's an awakening happening in the midst of the shaking, where people are going, you know what? I didn't think I had what it takes, but man, put me in the middle of hot water and I'll show you what I'm capable of. People are coming out of the woodwork into a place where they can actually be useful for the kingdom of God and exercise the great gifts that would otherwise have been held dormant. And shaking, here's what happens with shaking, Tink. Shaking, it's not a bad thing. I mean, when I was a kid, I played pinball. Pinball, when you get the quarter stuck or you get the pinball stuck, you got to shake that thing. It's called tilt. Yeah. But guess what happened in tilt? You got your pinball unstuck. You got your quarter unstuck. The thing that was stuck in your life is getting unstuck in the middle of this thing. People, there's real things, real hardships going on. I don't want to silver line those things. Real hardships going on. But the hardships, we have to understand the difference between, the enemy taking from us and God rescuing us from golden handcuffs. When you got a pair of handcuffs on you, it doesn't matter if they're 24 karat gold. When God rescues you from those handcuffs, they might be golden, but he's wanting you to live in a freedom that you wouldn't have otherwise known. And so
Come on.
I believe we are in a tremendous time where people are, I mean, I'm watching the body of Christ emerge with sort of ideas, solutions, concepts that they would never have thought of before, and ways to reach out to their community, and ways to bring help and hope and the hands and feet of Jesus to the people in the world around them. It's a tremendous time. And so it's time to get in the game and not be sitting on the sidelines just going, wonder what's going to happen.
Come on. Gosh, what an incredible perspective. Thank you so much, Jamie. And thank you just so much for just sharing like your life with us, and for, giving us the behind the scenes of Domino's.
Makes me want to eat a pizza right now. A virtual pizza. Here you go.
Yeah. Next time. Absolutely.
Well,
thank you so much, Jamie, for being on the show. It was such a pleasure. We'll see you soon.
All right. See you. Take care. God bless.
Thank you. You too.